The Seattle Seahawks just walked off the field as Super Bowl champions again, and almost nobody outside that locker room ever saw this version coming. The final score reads, Seattle on top, New England chasing shadows. But the real shock is who is standing in the middle of the confetti. It is Sam Darnold, the same quarterback so many people gave up on, holding the Lombardi with a calm face while the crowd loses its mind. This was supposed to be the night of young star Drake May. This was supposed to be the next Patriots rise. And instead, it turned into a long, slow statement that Seattle is not just back. They are in control. 14 wins, a dominant playoff run, and now a Super Bowl 60 win over New England, all led by a player who was once the punchline to every failed prospect joke. That alone makes this game feel less like a simple win and more like a rewrite of how this league judges quarterbacks and teams that refuse to quit on their own plane. On offense, Seattle did not need fireworks every single drive. They needed trust, timing, and players who never stopped pushing when the game tightened. Sam Darnold did not try to be a highlight machine. He played like a surgeon with a clock in his head, taking the safe throws until the one that mattered opened up, like that floating strike to A.J. Barner in the back of the end zone that felt like the door slamming shut. Every time the crowd started to feel a little nervous, Kenneth Walker III answered with another punishing run, leaning on New England until their front finally cracked and the lanes got wider. Jackson Smith and Jigba fought through hits and tight coverage. Cooper Kupp turned small windows into first downs like it was second nature. And Rashid Shaheed kept the Patriots honest every time he lined up wide or waited for a punt. This was not one star dragging an offense. It was a group of players who fit together so cleanly that even a modest box score from Sam Darnold felt powerful, because every snap looked like it came from a plan that had been built for years, not weeks. Then there is the part of this story that will keep offensive coordinators up at night, the defense shaped by Mike Macdonald that turned a young, talented Patriots attack into a long, uncomfortable evening. DeMarcus Lawrence looked reborn. Leonard Williams kept collapsing the pocket from the middle, and every time Drake May tried to reset and make a big throw, someone like Devin Witherspoon came screaming off the edge or closing from the slot to blow up the play. It did not matter that the Patriots piled up some late yards when the game was already slipping away, because by then Seattle had already proved their point, that this defense can choke out a high-powered offense without leaning on one single star. When you see all of this together, a balanced attack, a deep, mean defense, a calm Sam Darnold running the show, it is easy to think it just clicked by magic this year. The truth is much colder and much smarter, and it starts years before this night with a general manager who was willing to trade a franchise legend, move on from safe names, and build a roster that could carry this exact moment. But before we jump into that, hit that like and subscribe button for more Seahawks and all the NFL content. Can we hit 500 likes on this video? Nobody talks about the quiet moment in the front office when a franchise decides to blow up its old image. But that is where the Seattle Seahawks story really changed. Not on Super Bowl night. Before Sam Darnold ever put on this jersey, before Kenneth Walker III was carrying this team through January, John Schneider made the move that most fan bases would have called impossible and traded Russell Wilson at a time when people still called him a top quarterback. Denver paid a massive price because they thought they were one quarterback away, but Seattle walked out with a pile of first-round and second-round picks, extra mid-round shots, and a clean slate on the salary cap. In that moment, Schneider chose long-term pain over short-term comfort, and that choice is the reason you are watching confetti fall on this roster now, instead of arguing about another early playoff exit with the old core. Once that reset button was hit, Schneider did not chase quick headlines. He went back to his old blueprint and doubled down on the draft. Those extra picks turned into pillars, not side pieces. You see it in Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas stabilizing the tackle spots, in Devin Witherspoon turning into the tone setter in the secondary, and Byron Murphy joining the pass rush wave, and Ernest Jones coming in mid-season and flipping the run defense from soft to solid. Even the hard choices at wide receiver came from planning instead of panic. Toole letting DK Metcalf leave for a monster deal in Pittsburgh and cutting ties with a longtime playmaker Tyler Lockett would have ripped the heart out of most passing games. But Schneider had already bet on Jackson Smith-Njigba becoming a true number one and knew he could go fishing in the veteran market for the right fit at the right price. The wild part is how ruthless that plan looked from the outside and how calm it looks now that the trophy is back in Seattle. When the Los Angeles Rams tried to push Cooper Kupp toward retirement and whispered about his injuries, Schneider ignored the noise and brought him in on a smart contract that gave Sam Darnold a trusted veteran target for the biggest downs of the year. When people thought DeMarcus Lawrence and Leonard Williams were closer to the end than the middle, he turned them into leaders of a deep front instead of fading names on bloated deals. And with Kenneth Walker III, he did the simplest thing that so many teams forget to do. He trusted his own pick, kept stacking the line in front of him, and let a young back grow into the kind of player who can walk into a Super Bowl, own the tempo, and leave with an MVP in his hands. That is the real twist in this story, because once you see how carefully this roster was built, you start to realize the coaching change from Pete Carroll to Mike Macdonald and the handoff from Geno Smith to Sam Darnold were not wild gambles at all. They were the next cold steps in a plan that had been running for years in the background. The wild part of this whole story is that the Seattle Seahawks had to break their own heart before they could fix anything. For years, the answer to every problem was trust Pete Carroll, trust the culture, trust the script that once brought a title to the city. The record stayed decent, the vibes stayed positive, but the same pattern kept showing up: good enough to fight, not sharp enough to finish. Especially when they ran into the new wave of coaches in their own division. Deep down, everyone knew it. The team was stuck in a safe middle, living off old glory, while younger minds were out scheming them on Sundays. Walking away from a legend is one of the most painful choices a franchise can make. But Seattle finally decided that staying comfortable was more dangerous than starting over. The same thing was true under center with Geno Smith. His first run as starter was an amazing story, and nobody can take that away from him. Whoa. But as the hits piled up and the offense turned stale under a college-style play caller, the ceiling inched lower every week. It would have been easy to keep rolling with the safe veteran and talk about loyalty, but that is not how you beat the new contenders. Enter Mike Macdonald, young, aggressive, and completely unbothered by the idea of shaking the whole building. He did not come in to tweak a few blitz calls. He came in to reset how this team thought about practice, film, and game plans. The staff changed, the language in meeting rooms changed, even the kind of quarterback he wanted changed. When Geno Smith was moved to the Las Vegas Raiders, it was not a slight. It was a sign that Seattle was ready to build an offense that matched this new defensive identity, tighter, colder, and more controlled. That is where Sam Darnold slipped into the picture, not as a desperate swing, but as a very specific answer. Macdonald knew how he carried himself from their shared time with the San Francisco 49ers, knew how he handled coaching, knew he would not crumble the first time the defense had to drag a low-scoring game across the finish line. The front office wrote the contract so the team had protection. The new staff built a scheme that leaned on structure instead of hero ball, and the locker room watched a guy who had been beaten up by the league walk in, keep his head down, and win their respect day by day. By the time he was out playing a young star on Super Bowl night, the trust they had in him felt natural, not forced. But to really understand how crazy that journey is, you have to rewind further, back to bad nights with the New York Jets, tough stretches with the Carolina Panthers, the learning year with the Niners, and that wild season with the Minnesota Vikings, when people still called him a bridge. That is where the next part of this story really begins. Nobody expected the Seattle Seahawks to be lifting a Lombardi with Sam Darnold as the steady hand, because for a long time, his name meant something very different in this league. With the New York Jets, he walked into chaos, a young quarterback asked to fix a broken roster with no real plan around him. and every mistake got pinned straight on his shoulders. By the time that chapter ended, people had already decided what he was, not because of who he could be, but because of the environment he was stuck in. The trade to the Carolina Panthers was supposed to be a reset, but injuries piled up. Christian McCaffrey went down, the record stayed ugly, and the label followed him. Bust, miss, overrated. It did not matter that the situation was bad. The league moved on to the next storyline and left Sam Darnold standing there with a damaged image and a lot of questions about what came next. The turning point did not come with fireworks. It came when Sam Darnold accepted that he needed to sit, learn, and rebuild his own game away from the spotlight. With the San Francisco 49ers, he spent his time behind Brock Purdy, working under Kyle Shanahan, studying structure and timing instead of trying to play hero ball on every snap. That season did not give him viral highlights, but it gave him something more important, a new understanding of rhythm, protections, and how to play winning football without forcing throws. Then came the move to the Minnesota Vikings, where Kevin O'Connell handed him the keys and weapons like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. For most of that year, he looked like a different player, hitting tight windows, stacking strong games, and reminding everyone why he was drafted so high in the first place. When that run ended with a rough loss to Detroit and a bad playoff showing against the Rams, people rushed back to the old takes. But inside league circles, coaches had seen enough to know there was something real to work with if you built the right way around him. That is what made Seattle different when they finally called. The contract they gave Sam Darnold was smart protection for the team, but the plan behind it was pure belief. Mike Macdonald and his staff were not asking him to chase numbers. They were asking him to run an offense built on trust, timing, and letting the talent around him do damage. All the scars from New York and Carolina, all the lessons from San Francisco and Minnesota turned into a calm presence in the huddle, a quarterback who understood that sometimes the best play is the simple throw that keeps the chains moving and lets your stars go to work. By the time he was standing in the pocket in Super Bowl 60, hitting A.J. Barner, leaning on Kenneth Walker III, trusting Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp in big moments, it no longer felt like a surprise comeback. It felt like the final step of a long rebuild of one career. And the crazy part is, Seattle was not done reshaping everything around him, because the way they built this offense for Sam Darnold and his playmakers is a story of its own. The Seattle Seahawks did not shape this offense, so Sam Darnold could fire deep shots on every snap. They built it so defenses had to survive a steady storm they could not slow down. The center of gravity was Kenneth Walker III, not as a safety valve, but as the point where every drive started to tilt. When he got rolling in Super Bowl 60, carrying defenders for extra yards and squeezing through tiny spaces, you could see New England start to sag. By the time he finished with a line around 135 rushing yards and close to 5 a carry, it was clear this was not just a nice game. It was the blueprint in full view. Seattle wanted safeties creeping down, linebackers guessing wrong, and once that happened, everything else in this offense snapped open for Sam Darnold without him forcing anything. What made it even more dangerous was how cleanly the passing game wrapped around that run-heavy core. Jackson Smith-Njigba moved all over the formation, winning short, winning in the middle, and forcing corners to respect him, even when he was fighting through pain. Cooper Kupp turned third downs into a routine, settling into soft spots, finishing tough grabs, and giving Sam Darnold a trusted answer anytime the pocket started to squeeze. A.J. Barner flipped his old label as just a blocker into a weapon near the goal line, slipping behind coverage for that red zone touchdown that felt like the moment the air left New England. Add in Rashid Shaheed, threatening deep and on returns all season, and you had a group where every route made sense. Every motion had a purpose, and every throw looked like it belonged to the play, or not to a quarterback chasing highlights. This was the opposite of chaos ball. It was controlled pressure on every blade of grass. Up front, the line gave that whole plan a real body. Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas battled through their own rough stretches in past years, and came into this run with a different edge, keeping Sam Darnold clean enough for the timing throws and giving Kenneth Walker the third lanes to attack instead of walls to crash into. Even when Zach Charbonnet went down and the rotation tightened, the blocking stayed steady, which says a lot about how much this group grew. Credit also goes to the way the play caller leaned into what this roster did best, using play action, boots, and quick rhythm throws that matched Sam Darnold and his teammates instead of forcing someone else's playbook on them. The result was simple on the surface, a balanced attack that bled the clock and moved the chains. But underneath it gave Seattle something even more valuable: control of tempo, field position, and the flow of every quarter. And when you hand that kind of control to a defense built by Mike Macdonald, you are about to see why this Super Bowl looked like such a long night for Drake May and the Patriots. The crazy part about Super Bowl 60 is that the score does not really show how rough this night was for the Patriots offense, because the Seattle Seahawks defense had them in a chokehold from the opening drive. Every time Drake May dropped back early, there was a different problem in his face: an edge crashing from one side, a tackle shooting the gap, a defensive back flashing into his throwing lane. The late yards New England stacked once the game was already slipping away cannot erase the images from the first 3 quarters. May double clutching, pulling the ball down, feeling hands on the ball and on his shoulders as the pocket folded in on him. You could feel the frustration building with every hit, every drive that ended in a field goal or a punt instead of a statement. For all the talk about Seattle winning with balance and smart offense, this was the side of the ball that actually broke the Patriots' will. Up front, this looked like a machine that had been built piece by piece for nights exactly like this. DeMarcus Lawrence brought veteran power and bend on the edge. Leonard Williams kept collapsing the middle, and Byron Murphy added that young burst that turns a good rush into a jailbreak. When those 3 were not in the backfield, Derek Hall was flying off the corner for sacks and strip plays. Riley Mills was winning with effort on the inside. Uchenna Nwosu and Boy Moffitt were closing from wide angles. It never felt like New England could key on one name and breathe when he went to the sideline, because there was always another fresh body rolling in. Behind that front, Ernest Jones cleaned up everything that leaked through, reading runs fast, dropping into windows, and quietly turning what used to be a soft middle into one of the toughest places to attack in football. The more the game went on, the more the Patriots' playbook shrank, because every call started to feel like a guess against a defense that knew where the ball was going before the snap. In the back end, the attitude was just as ruthless. Devin Witherspoon played like a storm, one snap locking a receiver in man coverage, the next snap timing a blitz and blasting through the backfield to blow everything up, always right at the edge of chaos, but never out of control. Julian Love kept the structure steady, reading the quarterback eyes, sliding into passing lanes, making sure there were no easy freebies over the top. On the outside, Rick Woolen used his length and speed to force tight throws that had to be perfect. And on a night where May was already under constant pressure, perfection was never coming often enough. Put it all together, and you had a defense that did more than win a title. It handed Seattle something personal, proof that this new era could stand toe-to-toe with anyone and clamp them when it mattered most. And when you remember who they did it against, the same franchise that once snatched a ring away at the 1-yard line, you start to see why this win felt less like a normal Super Bowl and more like long overdue payback, which is where this story goes next. The Seattle Seahawks did much more than win Super Bowl 60 over the New England Patriots. They finally walked back into the pain of that old goal, line loss against Tom Brady, and changed how the story ends for this franchise. This time, it was Sam Darnold calmly closing the game instead of being a punchline. Drake May feeling the long, frustrating night, Kenneth Walker III finishing the job on the ground, Devin Witherspoon creating chaos on defense, and Cooper Kupp making clutch grabs in Seattle colors, while loyal fans who lived through every joke and meme finally felt that weight lift. With Mike Macdonald treating this like the start of a planned rise, not a lucky break, And young core pieces like Kenneth Walker III, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Devin Witherspoon, and Boy Math still early in their prime years, the win wipes away the worst scar in team history and opens a new question for everyone watching: if this was a single perfect run or the first chapter of a Sam Darnold era that could sit on the top of the league for a long time. The real drama for the Seattle Seahawks starts after the parade, because now the franchise has to decide if Sam Darnold lifting the Lombardi is a one-season miracle or the start of a long run built around a young core that includes Kenneth Walker III, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Devin Witherspoon, all growing under Mike McDonald. Now the pressure shifts to John Schneider to extend Sam Darnold without killing cap space and reward Kenneth Walker III and later Jackson Smith-Njigba and Devin Witherspoon. Keep veterans like DeMarcus Lawrence and Leonard Williams on smart deals, and replace departing play caller Clint Kubiak with someone who understands this offense. On top of that, every draft and free agency move will either sharpen this identity around physical lines, Kenneth Walker III, Cooper Kupp, and high-ceiling defenders like Rick Woolen, or clutter it with short-sighted splashes. One ring with Sam Darnold proves the plan can work, but what Seattle does in these next quiet months will decide if we remember this as a single comeback story or the moment a new Seahawks era quietly took control of the league.